I never faulted her for putting me up for adoption. Like, in my mind, I always kind of rationalized that it was because she was too young. And that's just kind of how I imagined it. You know, there was just some circumstance that she loves me, but she wasn't in a position to raise me. And so that's just kind of what I lived on. I never felt like I wasn't wanted by her.
Who am I?
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 This is Who Am I, Really? A podcast about adoptees that have located and connected with their biological family members. I'm Damon Davis, and on today's show is Kandi, with a K. Kandi called me from Laurel, Mississippi. She's a mother of 7 children with a family composition similar to her own as a child. One of her kiddos is adopted, and the others are biological to herself. Kandi tells the tale of how that adoption came to be after guidance through prayer, her good fortune to spend time with her birth mother before losing the woman, and the forgiveness she holds in her heart for the man who forced her into this world. This is Kandi's journey. Kandi was born in Gulfport on the coast of Mississippi, but her story starts well before her own birth, with her adopted mother back when she was a child around 6th grade. As a part of a church program called Girls in Action, her mother's church took young girls to a home for unwed mothers. It's not clear to Kandi what the purpose of the trip was for the girls, but she does know it was impactful on her mother.
And so my mom had gone, and while she was visiting and looking around, she saw a baby in the nursery there, and she promised God that when she grew up that she would adopt. Fast forward, she married her high school sweetheart, and they were told it would be very difficult for them to get pregnant, but they tried anyway, and finally had my oldest sister. No complications, but the doctor was like, you know, you're not going to be able to get pregnant again. Like, this was just a one-shot thing. And so after several years of not being able to get pregnant, they decided to start looking at adoption. It took about 5 years for them to finally get their hands on me. So I was only about, I think I was about 14 days old when I came home. And my older sister by that time was 13 years old, and she was actually the first person that got to hold me. So that was really special for her. And a lot of people, because I had blonde hair and my sister had blonde hair, they always assumed that I was hers. But and so she babysat me a lot, and she just loved it. Well, by the time I guess I was about 9 or 10 months, maybe even older, my mom found out she was pregnant. And so then she had my little sister. So I'm sandwiched between 2 biological children.
Kandi always knew she was adopted. Her parents told her she was chosen, special, and God loved her. She remembers reading the book Why Was I Adopted by Carolyn Eastman. Kandi said her mother did try to meet her curiosity about her adoption, but she thinks discussing it was hard on her mother sometimes.
I think she had a lot of fear that I would find my adoptive family and leave her and run off with them, I guess. Just irrational thoughts like that. That was kind of, I never wanted to hurt her feelings and make her feel like she wasn't my mom or wasn't important, because she very much was. She, made me who I had a big part in who I am today.
Kandi knew she was a little different from her sisters, but the siblings were all treated the same, and their family had a lot of love. She noted that there were some things that fulfilled her that her adoptive family wasn't proficient at, like art, dance, and music. Kandi said her mother had papers documenting her adoption from the Catholic diocese on the Gulf Coast of Mississippi, so she suspected her birth mother was from that area. Whenever she was down there, she always looked around for someone who she thought looked like herself.
My mom had papers. I remember she'd pull them out every once in a while, and we would kind of look through them. And really the only thing it said was that she was an attractive young woman, and that she liked art. And so I was like, oh, that's me, like I love art. And I think it said something about her having curly hair. And I was like, oh, I've got curly hair. I was the only one out of the family that had curly hair. And so I just kind of, I don't know, identified with that. Growing up, my mother's father had a fishing camp in Gaucher down in that area. And so when we'd go, we would drive to Gulfport where they had a mall. And I would always kind of look around to see if I ever saw anybody that looked like me. I never had anybody say, wow, you don't look like anybody in your family. But I never saw anybody that really looked like me. And so I was always, I wanted to see what I looked like, like what my family looked like, my birth family. And when I was in college, I worked at a Baptist camp. I was at the western stretch of the coast. So some friends of mine had gone to the mall, at that same mall that I would always look for birth family. And they came back and they're like, hey, we just saw your sister. I mean, she looked just like you, and they're like, is your sister in town? I was like, well, maybe. And they just kind of looked puzzled. And I explained to them that I was adopted, and there was a high probability that there was some birth family somewhere on the coast. I could have a sister, I could have a brother, I don't really know. And they're like, well, this girl really looked like you. She had dark curly hair, just like yours. And
wow.
And so come to find out later, once I did meet my birth family, they lived like within walking distance to the mall, and my half sister would go to the mall frequently.
Is that right?
That was probably her. Yeah.
Whoa.
So,
that's
just
crazy.
so close.
That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Did you believe it though at the moment? Did you sort of cling to that? Like maybe they did see me. Did you have a feeling like an urge to run over there?
Yeah. I mean, I would kind of always say, well, they probably did. I mean, I knew there was a possibility. So, I was just kind of like, yeah, probably so.
Kandi's mother told her that when she turned 18, she could search for her birth family. The Catholic diocese told her mother way back when that when the baby turned 18, she could submit a letter to the diocese to seek her out. They said if they also had a letter from her, the mother, they would connect the pair. But Kandi was in college when she was 18 years old, a time when she was focused on her future, so she didn't feel that urge to begin the search process. She said when she was pregnant with her first child, she kind of started the search, realizing that she didn't know anything about her own biological contribution to the child. So she did submit a letter to the Catholic diocese, but there was no letter on file from her birth mother. Therefore, the diocese sent a copy of her de-identified information with the identifiable data redacted.
So when I got it, I had a very startling revelation that was included, and I had no idea. My mom had no idea that my birth mother was only 17 and a junior in high school when she was raped.
Oh.
It was by somebody in the military.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he'd come in through the back door of the home that she was staying in, and he was intoxicated with something and raped her at knife point, and she was only 17. So when I read all this, I was pretty devastated, not so much for myself, but for her. I just kept, I don't know, like I always had a fear of being raped so much that I would kind of obsess about it when I was in high school. I kind of got over it when I was older, but when I read that, I was like, well, I wonder if that's why I was so obsessed with that fear for a time when I was in high school. I just thought that was really odd.
That is interesting.
And
that's the same time frame that she was attacked.
Yeah.
And that's when your fear was at its highest. And then it subsided.
Yes. Yeah. I was really brokenhearted for her that she had to endure all of that. And so I got to the very last page of all the information that they had given me. and they accidentally left her full name on the very last page.
Wow. So, in 2008, while pregnant with her first child, Kandi obtained her full birth name, the story of how she came into the world, and her birth mother's full name. She already figured out her mother was probably from the Gulf Coast, so she took to social media to look for the woman and started digging through online resources. On a yearbook website, she found her birth mother's name twice, once for the year she would have graduated and once for the prior year. Unsure which account to contact, she messaged them both. There was no response, but Kandi figured it had to be her mother, suspecting that the woman may have dropped out of school the year she was born, then re-enrolled after her birth. Kandi found an online adoption registry that allowed her to identify herself and enter as much identifying information as possible, and she had a lot.
I remember finding something where I could put in my information and what I knew about her and that I was looking for her. And somehow my half-brother found it, because he had been helping his mom look too. And I guess he was just searching and found that I was looking for her in the day I was born. And he was like, "Mom, I think this is her." And she said, she looked at my name and was like, "That's the girl that messaged me on yearbook." And so she saw my message, but she thought that I was somebody her age being nosy, because my question was, did you ever put a baby up for adoption? And that's just kind of where I left it,
Mm-hmm.
And so she messaged me back and was like, "I did, wait, when were you born?" And so we started corresponding through yearbook, and then we exchanged numbers. And so, that was, a very exciting, time to think, wow, I finally found her,
Yeah.
And we found each other on Facebook, and looking at her picture, I was like, wow, I look so much like her, it's just crazy.
So you saw her face
and so
online,
we set it up.
and you look just like her.
Yes.
What did that feel like for you?
That was really cool. I don't know, she's beautiful. And so I was like, wow, do I look like that? And I was like, I have a lot to look forward to.
Mm-hmm. At the time, Kandi didn't know that it was her half-brother who found her online. Her birth mother told her that story sometime later. Kandi said she saw elements of herself in her mother's Facebook profile, like her creative nature. She dressed differently in outfits full of color, just like Kandi was known for in high school. After messaging back and forth, the mother and daughter pair arranged to meet halfway between their homes in Hattiesburg. Kandi lived in the northern Delta. Her mother was still in Gulfport. Her birth mother brought her husband. Kandi brought her husband and her son, the woman's 1-year-old grandson.
It was just really kind of surreal, like when I saw her for the first time in person, and we hugged, and I don't know, it was really cool, to see parts of me and her face and her smile and some of the gestures, like things that she does when she talks. I do the same thing. It's just really odd. It helps you to see how much is nature versus nurture,
Yeah, it's really crazy.
So,
Kandi says she and her birth mother hit it off and got along well. She tried to be respectful of her own mom and not dive into a relationship with her birth mother, so they took things slowly. Kandi's mom wanted to meet her birth mother, but her mom struggles with anxiety that she wasn't able to work through, so she just wasn't ready.
there was a lot of drama after I met my birth mom, because my family was very possessive of me, and they didn't want to share me. And so, because they didn't meet each other right off, there was a lot of irrational ideas in their heads about how my birth family was going to be and how they were going to react, and, just everything, I guess. And so there was a lot of bickering amongst my family and my birth family. There's just misunderstandings. thought they knew what somebody meant by a comment, and so it was, they had to eventually just stop being friends on Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
So that everybody could get along. And so that was really, really hard because, I could see where both sides were coming from. And I wanted them all to get to know each other because I knew they would love each other. So, that was hard.
Yeah, it sounds like it is hard. You've got two different worlds, people who know you from different perspectives, and folks who wouldn't probably necessarily be friends were it not for your presence. And so for you to be stuck in the middle in that way has got to be tough. And I can understand your desire to sort of want them to get to know each other, but it's also challenging to, in any way sort of push people together or try to pull them together when they wouldn't normally be brought together. So, but it's interesting that they tried. They tried to connect with one another on Facebook and things like that. So they made an effort.
Yeah, yeah. And, my birth mom was like, I know I'm not your mom. And, she's like, I just want to have a relationship with you. And I want to be able to be part of your life, but I know I'm not your mom, and she's like, I don't want to try to take your place as your mom. That's like, I know that your mom is your mom, and I gave birth to you. And she said that she told me that when she found out that she was pregnant, she didn't tell anybody for a while, because she really wasn't even sure she was, but, she said she knew that God was using her to be a vessel for a couple to have a baby who couldn't.
Kandi's birth mother said very few people in her family knew that she placed a baby for adoption, but she and Kandi's maternal grandmother always remembered her.
Every year on the calendar on my birthday, they would put LW, which stood for Little Who. And
Little Who.
And they would always pray for me.
Wow.
Yes, Little Who, and she did get to hold me when I was born, and so she knew that I was a girl, but that's all she knew. They didn't tell her anything, and in fact, they didn't even tell her that she could send in a letter, to help connect us, and so she didn't even knew that was a thing, and she had requested that I know that she was raped, and she was really upset when she found out that I had no idea what had happened, and because that was one of the requests she had made to the diocese, which I can imagine that would be kind of hard. When do you tell your child that they're the product of a rape? How do you even go about talking about that? That would be very difficult. I have to sit down and explain that, but
not to mention,
so maybe that's why the diocese didn't pass that information along. I don't know.
Yeah, I can't help but wonder too how that impacts a person when they grow up with that knowledge from an early age. I would imagine that at the time that you learned that information about yourself, you were fairly well on your way to knowing who you were and what kind of person you were, like having built the inner strength to accept something when it turned up in your search. So to learn that at an earlier age could be pretty traumatic, I would imagine, for a person.
Yeah. I am glad that I found out when I was older. I never faulted her for putting me up for adoption. Like, in my mind, I always kind of rationalized that it was because she was too young. And that's just kind of how I imagined it. That it was just, there was just some circumstance that she loved me, but she wasn't in a position to raise me. And so that's just kind of what I lived on. I never felt like I wasn't wanted by her. And I think that was her fear, that she didn't want me to think that she just threw me away. And I never thought that. That was never anything in my mind. So, I was very grateful to her for what she did and giving me a mother and a father, and that's what she wanted, was for me to have both. And one fear that I had was that when she saw me, that she would see the perpetrator. And I was afraid that would bring back painful memories for her.
Mm-hmm.
If it did, she never said that it did.
Being the product of a rape is extremely difficult territory in reunion. As Kandi said, she didn't want her reemergence to trigger haunting memories from her birth mother's past. Thankfully, that didn't happen, but something else did cause her mother to pull back. To have heard from your parents that you were the product of a rape, did you find that you were able to talk to her about the incident? Did she give you the details of being raped at knife point, or were you ever able to discuss it with her? And did you have any reason to?
Well, she did tell me. I mean, what I know was from her. I wanted to talk more in depth, and in fact, I had talked to a couple that they do a lot of videography, and my husband and I wanted to have our story on video, and we wanted to tell our story so that we could, pass it down to our children, and just our love story. And then it turned into so much more, because, I mean, when you talk about how we met, you also have to talk about God's hand in my adoption too, to even bring about the fact, or bring about us meeting. And so then it turned into a story about about my adoption as well. And so I wanted to make sure I had all my facts straight. And so when I approached her with that, it scared her, because I think she thought I wanted all the details. And I didn't. I just wanted to make sure that what I said was accurate, and that I didn't tell the wrong story.
Yeah.
And so she really backed up and was like, I don't know. I'm not ready to talk about that yet.
Mm-hmm.
So it just seemed like she really didn't want to, just wasn't really ready to go there, and maybe hadn't even processed it well enough to talk about it in depth. And so I never wanted to push her into, having to relive that.
Wow. So are things still good with you guys?
Well, actually, March 29th of last year, she died. She was going home. I'm not sure where she was coming from exactly. I haven't tried to ask too many questions because I don't want to pry. But she was on her way home, and the intersection, it was very confusing, and she actually went up the wrong ramp and was going the wrong way on the interstate, and hit a truck head on, and it killed her instantly.
Oh my god!
And so that was, I know, it was almost a year ago.
Oh man!
And so it was good, and in fact, there's another twist to the story.
She learned that her half-sister had just gotten engaged. Since Kandi wanted to have a deeper relationship with her sister, she and her husband went to the wedding shower. They also learned her sister was pregnant and the family was expanding. But then Kandi had a weird feeling, so she chatted with her birth mother, who was alive at the time.
After a while, I had not heard anything about the baby. And so I contacted my birth mom, and I was like, hey, is everything okay? I haven't heard anything about the baby. And she said, well, I don't want you to say anything, but she's thinking about putting the baby up for adoption. And so, come to find out, like, the guy she married she had dated in high school, and she didn't know the depth of his drinking problem. And so after she got pregnant, which was it wasn't a planned pregnancy, but they were excited. But then she found out that he had this issue with alcohol, and she had already been through a relationship where her husband was on, I think, on some kind of drugs or something, and she didn't want to do it again. She didn't want to have to do
be the spouse of
the
a substance.
co-parenting thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, and deal with that. And so she really felt like it was best to put the baby up for adoption. And they had picked a couple, to do that. And so, I contacted her and I was like, look, if that doesn't work out, we'd be glad to take her. That way, she'd be in the family. And so after some prayer, she was like, yes, I definitely want you to have the baby. And that way, she could be aunt and see the baby. The problem was convincing the dad, because they were married. In Mississippi, if you're pregnant, you can't get a divorce. He was really wanting to keep the baby. Long story short, we called him and we just said, look, we just want what's best for the baby. And so we prayed with him and just told him that we're here, we're not his enemy, we want what's best for everybody. And he called us and told us that he wanted us to have the baby, which my half sister was like amazed, because she thought that he would never change his mind. She thought she would have to go to court and battle him for the baby.
The baby's father wasn't really in a position to take care of a newborn himself. He moved back in with his parents and went to rehab. In January 2017, it seemed like the baby was coming any minute. So Kandi went down to the Gulf Coast to be with her sister. But the little girl took her time coming into the world.
And so right before the baby was born, I had gone down to the coast and I got to spend some time with all my family without any children of my own down there, by myself, and just got to kind of hang out during their daily grind, and because we thought that the baby was coming soon, so I had gone down there and hung out for a couple of days. I got to my biological grandmother and visit with her and see my brother, and so I got to do that for a couple of days, which
that's nice.
It was January, and then she passed in March.
Oh,
so I was so thankful that the Lord gave me that opportunity just to go be around her for that period of time and see her and talk with her.
That is amazing.
The baby was born in January last year. And so I was right there right after she was born. My birth mom, actually, this was the only birth that she was able to attend.
Kandi's birth mother was present for her grandchild to be born. The baby would soon be adopted by her own child given up for adoption long ago. Kandi said the waiting period, 72 hours, was hard to wait because they could have changed their mind about relinquishing the child. But she said again, she only wanted what was best for the child, and if her sister changed her mind, Kandi would have accepted their decision and supported them however she could. The baby's adoption sets up an interesting dynamic within the family, though. So may I ask, the child's not that old, and the child's mother is your half-sister, but the child kind of knows the mother as the aunt. Have you thought about how you're going to explain to her who her mother is in adoption?
Yes. Right now, I try to give the biological families every opportunity they want to come and spend time with her. It's a little bit difficult for me. I know we haven't talked about this, but I actually have 7 kids, including her. And so it's difficult for me to just kind of up and go meet them on the coast or something like that. So, but I'm willing to, meet them halfway and, whatever they want to do, I'm open to letting them see her. Because, coming from the other side, I know what that's like. And so we try to do like some FaceTime so that she can see her aunt, but kind of the storyline that we're going to kind of start telling her as she's older, because I tell her now, but she doesn't really understand. She's just 13 or 14 months old, but that she grew in her aunt's tummy, but that she's ours. And so that's kind of, I don't want to be disrespectful, to my half sister,
right?
But she's ours now, and so it seems kind of harsh, but I don't know. There are a couple. It's really hard decision to make. Like, here we are. At the time we had 5 children. Like, what business do we have adopting another one? I don't know. We've always wanted to adopt. And so this just kind of fell in our lap, and we were like, well, is this God's plan or is it not? And so my husband and I really got on our faces and we're praying like, Lord, is this what we're supposed to do? And, if it's not, I even contacted one of my friends who has no children, and I was like offering the baby to her first. Like, I don't want to miss it if I was supposed to just be a connection. I didn't want to take the baby for myself, being selfish and not make sure I looked around to see if there was somewhere else she was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend was like, no, we don't feel like it's time for us to adopt yet, and so my husband and I we were praying. And prior to this, like months ago, before we even knew that there was a possibility of adopting the baby, a friend had delivered a word to us. And what I mean by that, like the Lord had told them to tell us that we were going to receive a gift that we felt like we didn't deserve. And so we're thinking, what could this be? What could this gift be that we feel like we don't deserve? What is it? And so when we were praying, my husband had a vision of my half sister handing him the baby wrapped up in a red bow. And then when he saw that, it just clicked, like, this was the gift. This is the gift that God had told us months ago that he was going to give us, that we didn't feel like we deserved. And,
wow.
Yeah. And also, while he's having that vision, I also had a vision, and mine was, I was holding the baby, and she was too little to have any kind of motor skills at that time in my vision. But when my husband walked up behind me while I'm holding her, she reached out for him. And, that just let me know. In my mind, I'm just thinking, yeah, and she needs her daddy.
Mm-hmm.
And this little girl is a daddy's girl. And she is all about some daddy.
Wow.
Like,
I was going to ask you if you saw
mama,
this relationship.
I don't know.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
So are the other 6 biological to you?
Yes.
She's the only adoptee?
Yes. She is the only one.
Gotcha.
And so, yeah. So that's kind of neat too, she's kind of in the same situation I was. She's the only adopted one.
Yeah.
But they love her tremendously.
Oh, that's so awesome.
And, but she follows daddy around, She's so sweet. She just loves her daddy.
That's really funny.
Definitely has a connection with him.
I had one final question for Kandi concerning DNA testing. As prevalent as commercialized DNA testing is, Kandi or her children might decide to submit their own samples for testing, to learn more about their own genetic makeup, or to find more relatives. Of course, since her birth mother was raped, it's a challenging option for her to ponder. A lot of adoptees have found their biological parents intentionally or accidentally through DNA testing. And obviously DNA testing could have some serious ramifications for you and whom you are identified with online. Have you thought about an occasion that might come up where you might decide you might have to make a decision to do DNA testing or not, and what you think you would do?
Yeah, I've actually been kind of looking into that. I have a close friend of mine whose daughter just did the DNA test. And so I was just watching very carefully what she's found and things like that. But for some people, it might seem kind of ridiculous. I don't know. But I do want to find my birth father. And he might not be the guy that he was, and maybe he is. He could be in jail somewhere. He might not be alive. I don't know. But, he probably has no idea I exist.
Right.
And so, I don't know. I am really curious about that because I don't know why. I feel like I have a lot of grace to give. And so I've thought about doing the the DNA test to see if there was a possibility that I could find somebody on that side of the family.
Mm-hmm. Wow. No, I don't think there's anything wrong with it at all. I'm sure some people might find it, weird, but regardless, I think one of the things that you said is important. He might not be the guy that he was back then, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, his life could have gone on multiple different trajectories. And if he is remotely in a positive space, it might not be a terrible thing to have tracked him down. But you'll be able to figure those things out as you cross each bridge, right? And one, you might not ever find him, in which case it's a moot point. But if you ever did, I mean, one would hope that he's not still the guy that he was back then. And and so there's that's a whole other maze of emotions and sort of a tactical journey to navigate to even try to find him, let alone whether he's interested in connecting, etc. So, and I totally understand why you would want to do it, because in fact, he is the other half of why you're on this earth. And that's undeniable.
Yeah. And his parents might be great. I mean, you don't know, might not have anything to do with him and his choices.
That's right.
So.
Right. Half siblings and aunts or uncles who are awesome or whatever. There's all kinds of possibilities out there, but also steel yourself against the fact that, he might still be that guy. And it's a lot to face, but I wish you luck in trying to find him and making a connection.
Well,
if you do, I hope you'll let me know.
Yeah, I will.
Very good. Well, Kandi, thanks so much for sharing your story. I think it's really amazing that you both were an adoptee in a family of biological children and have sort of transferred that to your own family in order to give somebody else a loving home. I think that's really awesome. And I'm glad you were able to find your biological mother, because, the fact that she was searching for you really means, and, they were writing your birthday on their calendar. It means she was really thinking about, who this baby was that she sent off into the world. And I'm glad you guys were able to connect for the short time that you did.
Yes, me too.
Cool.
I'm so thankful for that.
Good. Well, thank you for sharing your story today, Kandi. I appreciate it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Sure.
For interviewing me about it.
Of course.
Thanks.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey, it's me. I'm sure you could hear in Kandi's voice how truly thankful she was to have a chance to spend time with her birth mother before adopting her sister's baby, then tragically losing her mother in a head-on collision. It was also interesting to hear Kandi describe her desire to know her biological mother, but not wanting to resurrect terrible memories of the violent act that brought Kandi into this world. I'm glad her birth mother was in a place of acceptance to allow Kandi into her life. I'm sure that must have been hard to separate Kandi from the perpetrator. I wish Kandi luck in finding the man. Hopefully he's in a much more positive place than he was decades ago when Kandi was conceived. I'm Damon Davis, and I hope you'll find something in Kandi's journey that inspires you, validates your feelings about wanting to search, or motivates you to have the strength along your journey to learn, who am I, really? If you would like to share your adoption journey and your attempt to connect with your biological family, please visit whoamireallypodcast.com/share. You can choose to share your whole story, maintain some privacy about parts of your story, or tell your tale completely anonymous. It's totally up to you. You can also find the show at facebook.com/WAIReally or follow me on Twitter at WAIReally. And please, if you like the show, you can subscribe to Who Am I Really on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn Radio, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, take a moment to share a rating or leave a comment. Those ratings can help others to find the podcast too.